You don't need to shout to shake a room. Some people do it just by walking in. No grand gestures, no clever words, just a stillness, a clarity, a presence that unsettles everyone around them, not because they're loud, but because they don't have to be. That's the kind of mind Nietzsche believed in. Not one that commands by force, but one that dominates by depth.
We live in a world that rewards noise. Social feeds, open offices, non-stop meetings. Whoever speaks most is often assumed to be the one who knows the most. But something strange happens when someone enters that same space and does the opposite. They listen. They watch. They speak less, but say more. Suddenly, the usual rules falter. People become unsure of themselves. They second guess. Because when someone doesn't play by the normal cues, you can't read them. And when you can't read someone, you can't control them. Nietzsche understood this kind of psychological gravity. He believed that real strength wasn't about winning arguments or crushing enemies. It was about becoming so internally complete that the world couldn't offer you anything to chase, and couldn't take anything from you either. A self-reliant mind, a will trained not just to survive, but to create itself. That kind of person doesn't need applause. They don't need backup. Their clarity is unsettling because it's real in a way most people aren't used to. But that kind of mind is not gifted. It's built. Not in front of people, in private, in discomfort, in solitude. In the quiet, overlooked hours where others are searching for attention, a strong mind is shaping itself. It starts with a choice, not to be impressive, but to be honest. Not to follow the crowd, but to understand it. Not to win, but to see. And that's the terrifying part. Clarity isn't loud, but it's piercing. A person who sees through pretense, who isn't moved by trends, who doesn't flinch when their opinion is unpopular, that person breaks the usual rhythm of power. Look around any workplace, any group dynamic, and you'll notice how quickly people defer to energy, confidence, speed, volume. We're trained to respond to boldness even when it's empty. But a strong mind doesn't rush. It doesn't bluff. It doesn't need to. Instead, it does something far more dangerous. It watches. That's what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the will to power. Not just the will to control others, but the will to master yourself so completely that you don't react from fear, insecurity, or the need to belong. Most people are trying to be seen. A strong mind is trying to understand. And understanding makes people nervous. Because most environments are built on unspoken agreements. We'll act a certain way, say certain things, pretend not to notice the contradictions. But when someone sees past all that, when someone notices what others politely ignore, it disrupts the illusion. And illusions are what make most people feel safe. It doesn't take aggression to be feared. It takes composure. It takes discernment. It takes the kind of detachment that can sit in a storm without needing to prove anything. That's not apathy. That's power. The kind that doesn't announce itself. Nietzsche believed that solitude was the crucible of that power. Not because being alone makes you stronger by default, but because solitude removes the noise, the validation, the scripts, and when you strip all that away, what's left is the raw shape of your mind. Most people avoid that kind of encounter. They seek out distractions, social mirrors, environments where they can stay in motion. But a strong mind slows down. It asks harder questions. It listens longer. That's why it terrifies people, because a person who is no longer emotionally hijacked by the crowd is immune to most forms of control. They're harder to market to, harder to insult, harder to flatter, harder to provoke. In short, they are free. And freedom, in this sense, is threatening. Because freedom means you don't play the same game. You don't compete for what others are chasing. You don't bend to the pressure of consensus. You aren't terrified of being misunderstood. That's not aloofness. It's focus. It's a commitment to depth in a world obsessed with surface. And when you go deep, you see things others don't. You notice how much behavior is shaped by fear. Fear of missing out, fear of judgment, fear of failure. You start to read patterns. Who talks the most but says the least? Who signals virtue but hides resentment? Who smiles but envies? Who seeks power not to build, but to avoid feeling powerless? This isn't cynicism, it's awareness. And awareness is the foundation of a strong mind. But awareness comes at a cost. Once you see clearly, you can't unsee. And that makes certain conversations unbearable. It makes small talk feel hollow. It makes certain career ladders look more like hamster wheels. It makes some relationships feel like performances. And that's the paradox. Building a powerful mind doesn't always make life easier. Sometimes it makes things harder. You lose your taste for artificial rewards. You stop needing to be liked. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. And that shift unsettles people. Because when you're no longer performing, it calls their performance into question. When you no longer seek permission, it highlights how much they still do. When you're calm in crisis, it reveals how reactive they've become. That's what makes a strong mind dangerous, not because it attacks, but because it reflects. It becomes a mirror, and most people aren't ready to see themselves clearly, so they label you. Cold, arrogant, too intense, too quiet. But that's projection. They're not describing you, they're describing what they feel around you. What they feel is unfamiliar. A person who isn't playing the social survival game the way they do. And in a world where conformity is comfort, non-conformity is threatening. You don't need to be hostile to be feared. You just need to be sovereign. Sovereignty. That's the word Nietzsche danced around. A self-possessed way of thinking. A refusal to outsource your worth. A clarity so sharp it cuts through deception. That's not something you get from reading quotes. You earn it. You earn it in moments where you choose observation over reaction. In situations where you hold the silence longer than feels comfortable. In decisions where you value truth more than approval. In habits that strengthen your mind the way others strengthen their image. It's not about being perfect, it's about being principled with precision, knowing when to speak and when to wait, when to step forward and when to walk away, when to be still and when to strike. Because strategy is not the enemy of honesty, it's the amplifier of it. You can be kind and assertive, you can be humble and unshakable, you can be generous without being naive. That balance is what people fear most. Not a brute, but someone thoughtful and sharp, silent but aware, ethical but no fool. That kind of mind disorients people because it doesn't fit into any easy category. It's not soft, but it's not brittle. It's not cynical, but it's not blind. It's not loud, but it's unforgettable. And it didn't get that way by accident. It was shaped, refined, tempered by setbacks, solitude, and study. Nietzsche himself lived most of his life in quiet obscurity. His ideas were too complex, too unsettling for his time. But that didn't stop him, because he wasn't writing for his time. He was writing for the truth, and truth doesn't rush. It doesn't pander. It doesn't depend on followers. It stands alone, until others catch up. You don't need to terrify people to have power. You just need to stop needing them to feel powerful. That's when something changes. You stop asking, do they like me? And you start asking, do I respect myself after this decision? You stop asking, what will they think if I fail? And start asking, will I still be proud I tried? You stop calculating how to fit in and start deciding how to show up fully, even if that means showing up alone. And that's when the mind starts to sharpen, because there's no more split energy. No more chasing shadows, just alignment between what you think, what you value, and what you do. That's clarity. And clarity is strength. You don't have to intimidate anyone. You just have to stop living for them. Because the moment you build a mind that no longer craves their approval, no longer fears their rejection, and no longer bends to their expectations, you become something different, not invincible, but unshakable, not feared because you harm, feared because you can't be shaped by other people's confusion, feared because you don't need the mask, feared because you've already faced yourself, and that's the scariest kind of person to meet. Not the one trying to win, but the one who already did, quietly, when no one was watching.